Okay, so thank you so much, Julia, for the introduction. My name is Michelle. I'm the manager of programs and policy at Mind Your Plastic. We want to thank the Ajax Library for hosting today and to all of you for attending and learning a bit more about how you can reduce single-use plastics in your business operations and explore those alternatives that produce less waste. So a little bit about our organization before we dive into the content of the webinar. Mind Your Plastic is a registered Canadian charity, and we are dedicated to ending plastic pollution here in Canada. And we do this in a variety of different ways, but particularly by advocating for Canadian businesses to take impactful action in eliminating their plastic waste, by driving policy change and progressive solutions at the municipal government level, and by promoting circular economy in all areas, but especially in schools with youth and engaging them in how they can contribute to a world with less plastic pollution. And one of the reasons why we wanted to really kind of engage businesses today is we believe that they can really make a significant impact on the amount of single-use waste and plastics that are used in our economy. So as a result of this, one of our focus areas as an organization is our plastic awareness and reduction toolkits for businesses. And these toolkits are designed to help businesses address their single-use plastic and their waste footprint, and really to provide guidance on how to find those plastic weak spots that need to be addressed. And from there, the toolkits are intended to kind of provide those simple solutions and those first steps to begin eliminating unnecessary or problematic single-use items across business operations. So as of right now, we have developed toolkits for 4 industries: food service, retail, office and administration, as well as manufacturing. And these toolkits are all available for free on our website, mindyourplastic.ca. And I can also pop a link to those in the chat as well at the end of the presentation. And then in addition to those 4 industries, we've also worked with the Town of Ajax to develop a toolkit to reduce plastics at local events, which is also available on the town's website. So that brings me to this webinar, which is brought to you in partnership with the Town of Ajax. And through this partnership, we hope to engage the public in educational conversations and advocacy to promote efforts to reduce, our daily dependence on some of these single-use materials and really help identify some of those easy shifts that we can all feel better about. And through this collaboration, as I mentioned, we've produced this toolkit to reduce and eliminate single-use materials at events. But that spirit of reduction really carries over to all areas of our lives and into our businesses as well. So plastic pollution is a collective problem that really requires collaborative solutions across our community. So we really want to thank you for your interest in learning today. So I'm here today to talk about the plastic pollution problem, but what are these problems that we've encountered with plastic? Well, we know that less than 9% of all the plastic produced around the world and right here in Canada actually ends up being recycled. So all of the other plastics out there are either ending up in our landfills, they get burned or incinerated, or they end up in our environment as pollution. And by 2050, it's estimated that there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than fish. And every minute right now, more than 1 full dump truck of plastic enters our oceans. On the climate change side of things, plastic production and burning plastic as a disposal method generates 850 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions every year, which is actually more than the aviation industry and the shipping industry, which is a really staggering sort of fact. And on top of that, of course, we know plastic pollution has health impacts, and it can be deadly for wildlife that ingests the plastic or gets entangled in the plastic. And recently on human health, studies have found that plastics are increasingly being found in our bodies, from our blood and lungs to breast milk. And then a really recent report found nanoplastics in the human heart as well. So all of these ripple effects from our use of plastic and the resulting pollution are concerning for our environment and for our own personal health as well. So our problem with overconsumption isn't just with plastic altogether, but specifically with single-use plastics and other single-use materials. And by single use, we're really referring to all of those items and packaging and products that we encounter on a daily basis that are specifically designed and manufactured to be used only once or for a very short period of time and then immediately discarded. And we are consumers in what we know right now as the linear economy, which means that the products that we often have available to us to purchase are created with that intention of only being briefly used before they become waste. This is what we call a take, make, waste process. And within this process, convenience and cheap materials are prioritized without really taking into account all of the costs, both environmental and economic, that are associated with generating these excessive amounts of waste. And single use is an essential part of this linear economy, which is demonstrated here at the bottom with that graphic, where we take those natural resources from the environment, whether that's cutting down trees or fracking for oil, to make the products that we buy and use every day. And then after we've used that product or packaging once, it then becomes waste. And as we know from all the pollution and waste that we're currently dealing with, that this is just not a sustainable system. In contrast, a system that would use our materials to their maximum potential is called a circular economy. And the circular economy is defined as an economic system that really takes care of our renewable resources, it eliminates waste, and it reuses and recycles our material goods. And there are several really important elements that distinguish the circular economy from our current linear economy. And first off, the circular economy is going to reduce the amount of materials to produce our products and packaging. This kind of economy uses our waste as a resource in order to produce new materials and products. So we're not just, landfilling everything as we use it. And then ultimately, it would decrease and eventually eliminate the creation of most of our waste. And the graphic on the right there really gives a visual of how the circular economy works, where those raw materials get manufactured into the products that we use. Those products are then consumed and used by us, where they're returned around that circle to be recycled, or better yet, to be reused or repaired or refurbished with very little or no residual waste. And then that process continues, hopefully, in sort of an indefinite circle. So now that we've heard a little bit about the systems that we're engaging with, that lead us to interact with those single-use products so frequently, what are these products that we're encountering, and where in a lot of business operations are we coming across them? And this is just it's not an exhaustive list, but it's just 3 sort of primary areas where we find a lot of single-use and plastic items. So in business to consumer operations, you might find sort of some of the following single-use materials and packaging. For restaurants and food service locations, you could come across, your plastic beverage bottles, whether that's a water bottle or a soda bottle, your single-use coffee cups, styrofoam food containers or disposable plastic takeout containers, your hot and cold beverage cups, those checkout plastic bags, condiment sachets and single-serve units for liquids and sauces, and those tinier packets, and things along those lines that we see almost every day. And then for retailers or grocery locations, this could include things like single-use or mixed plastic or mixed material food packaging and pouches, single-use plastic film packaging, excessive or unnecessary packaging on consumer products. And I'm sure there's tons of other options that I don't have listed here, but that we see in a lot of these operations. And in business to business operations, there are also a lot of single-use materials and packaging that can go unnoticed compared to the consumer-facing sort of plastics and products. These operations actually tend to be a bit easier to transition because they don't even really require necessarily a behavior change or a change in consumer habits. It just requires sort of working with your suppliers or your partners to minimize the single-use materials that are used. And examples could include, that single-use secondary or tertiary packaging, single-use shipping pallet films, fill for packages like packing peanuts, or the shredded sort of beads of plastic or styrofoam, disposable overwraps, and other plastic films as well. And you'll see kind of on the right here some of the visuals for these single-use items, the multi-material pouches for frozen foods, the single-use food containers, that paper coffee cup that's actually likely going to be lined with some sort of thin plastic film to make it waterproof. But with the addition of that film, it actually renders it non-recyclable. And then as well, those overwrapped, bulk package of sauces, that plastic wrap is going to get landfilled as well. So anywhere that we can avoid sort of those excessive packaging materials that have no end of life pathway other than going in the garbage. And then finally, there are back of house and sort of staff materials that can be single use. And it's really important to kind of establish and build that culture of single use reduction, starting with the staff and really getting their buy-in. So it's also important that your staff are avoiding single use wherever possible. For example, they're not bringing their single use water bottles to work. They're bringing their reusable water bottle and refilling it on site, or they're bringing, plastic-free lunches, things of that kind of nature. And I really wanted to kind of briefly go over the single-use plastic prohibition regulations, because up until recently, these federal regulations to ban 6 commonly used single-use items really dominated a lot of the conversation regarding plastics in Canada. And as many of you may know, the regulatory framework that this policy kind of rests on has been challenged in the court by petrochemical companies. So despite this court ruling in favor of the petrochemical companies, this decision is actually being appealed. And for the time being, there is a stay on the regulations, which means that the regulations technically will remain in place as we kind of await that appeal, which I think is likely to happen. They're hoping sometime this summer, but that may be a bit of a stretch. But these regulations do technically stay in place until that appeal decision is made. So I thought I'd give a brief sort of overview of the regulations, with the recognition that it's a tricky sort of legal process that's ongoing right now, but also understanding that, that this work doesn't necessarily stop because of this court decision, and that we really have to continue to reduce single use in our communities and at the municipal level, even if those sort of broader, higher up regulations have maybe stalled slightly. So included in this ban are single-use plastic checkout bags, cutlery, food serviceware, ring carriers for beverages, plastic stir sticks, and straws. And then this ban covers the manufacturing, sale, and export of these plastics. So these plastics are no longer permitted to be manufactured or sold in Canada, with, of course, a few exceptions for accessibility purposes. And a few of these weren't planned to come into effect until 2024. So those are the 6 items that are banned. And a few of the sort of ban rules, we'll call them. Generally, the plastics that are subject to the regulations include polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, so styrofoam, PVC, and then other non-conventional plastics. So non-conventional plastics would include, a corn-based or sugar-based plastic that may come with a label of being compostable or biodegradable plastic. So generally, those are the non-allowable plastics. However, the exception to this is for food serviceware containers. So there are only 5 specific materials banned for food serviceware containers, and those include expanded polystyrene foam, and extruded polystyrene, that carbon black plastic, PVC, and then oxo-degradable plastics. So oxo-degradable means it's a mixture of an oil-based plastic with an additive that would allow the plastic to break down. But essentially, in the process of that plastic breaking down in a landfill, it would just result in more microplastics because it is oil-based. So those 5 are all banned. And you'll notice that this specific list doesn't include compostable plastics, which I have sort of in quotations there on the screen, compostable. But we strongly advise transitioning or strongly advise against transitioning to compostable plastics because not only are they typically more expensive than any other material solution, but actually in reality, they're more often than not compostable. So almost every municipality with a composting facility in Canada will actually refuse compostable plastics and compostable takeout containers because they don't compost at the same rate or temperature as that organic material that we collect, like the scrap food or the yard waste. So when that compostable plastic gets sorted out of the compost stream, it will just get sent to landfill instead. And in landfill, that compostable material actually will emit more methane due to its chemical composition. So really it's contributing more to greenhouse gases. So all that to kind of say, when we think about compostable plastics, we see that they've kind of been sold as a really great solution to single-use conventional plastics. But essentially, right now, with the infrastructure that we do have in Canada and even just generally in North America, compostable plastics are essentially kind of a really expensive greenwashing exercise and aren't really a true solution at this point in time. So, with that being said, what are some of those best alternatives to single-use items? And the best alternative that you can select is going to be a reusable. So there's no really kind of widely agreed upon definition of what constitutes a reusable packaging or product. But as an organization, we believe it can be defined as, a product or packaging that allows, either the business or the consumer to put the same type of purchased product back into that original packaging. And it's designed to be returnable or refillable. It's free of chemicals of concern, and then it can withstand multiple reuses. And there are so many really great and effective reusable options and systems that are available to us that we can really take advantage of. And some are going to be, more formal systems, and some are actually, more informal, and they're led by consumers and they can be supported by the businesses. And the first option that I have listed there are reusable cup and serviceware systems. So this is an option that could be provided by, a business, restaurant, or a cafe, where you're essentially, borrowing the foodware that you need to consume your drink or your meal. So for instance, if a consumer is dining in at a restaurant or a fast food place, the business would offer to serve the food on, a real ceramic plate with stainless steel cutlery instead of providing several pieces of single-use foodware like the plastic container, single-use plastic forks, those paper cups, that kind of thing. So this kind of system can serve kind of like a cafeteria style that prevents waste from being produced by using those reusables and really prioritizing those more durable materials. Deposit refund systems are also really popular, where you place, a deposit, whether they're frequently between, $1 to $5 on, say, to-go cup of coffee, or even, a mug for dine-in coffee. And then when the consumer is done using that packaging, they return their cup or their foodware to get that deposit back. And, this can be run by the business itself, or there are actually some really great third-party services that will collect the reusable cups and foodware. They'll wash them and then return them to the business. So that's kind of like an all-in-one service that's available. You might have heard of companies like Friendlier or Muse that are providing this sort of service in and around the GTA. There's also an option to promote having customers bring their own containers. And this can be kind of the easiest way to introduce reuse in a business. Consumers can bring their own reusable coffee cups or containers for takeout, or even for leftovers if they're dining in. And that really ensures that the business's waste is reduced and that the consumer's waste is reduced as well. And health authorities have actually confirmed following COVID that reusables, are perfectly safe when they're cleaned and used properly. So our advice for businesses, if they're, looking to promote BYO, is really to develop your own internal policy regarding when to accept and when not to accept customer reusables or refillables in order to ensure kind of the health and safety of everybody involved there. But additionally, within BYO, businesses can offer, discounts to customers for, really trying to incentivize the uptake of this kind of behavior as well. So there's lots of really great tips and tricks to get consumers involved. And then finally there are business-to-business applications that are reusable. So things like, reusable pallets for shipping, and these sort of supply and delivery trucks are moving back and forth between locations, and they actually already have a lot of the reverse logistics infrastructure established to adopt these kind of solutions where they haven't already. So you could have conversations with, your suppliers to better understand where elimination of single-use plastic is possible, and even maybe kind of set up some of these new initiatives to go reusable. And for example, there are businesses that, if they're a cafe, they get their coffee beans shipped in a reusable, sealable container or sack, and then that supplier collects and refills with new coffee beans every time they're making a delivery. And it's really just minimizing waste on all sides, and making it a really nice, convenient process for everybody involved to go reusable. So, one of the best parts about reuse is that it's an old system being, reinvented within, this modern world. And there are so many options that are being developed, and so many innovators and innovations that are happening, being launched by startups, that, you can find whatever or use whatever solution works best for your business, and whatever kind of works best for the consumer's lifestyle that you're looking to kind of be a part of. So that's kind of an overview of some of the reusable options that exist. But where reuse is not possible, which we kind of completely understand, maybe you're a business that is in an area that hasn't necessarily developed, a lot of these reuse innovations yet. There are still some good alternatives to single-use plastic that can be implemented. So we recommend looking for highly recyclable or compostable paper alternatives as a good alternative to single-use plastic. So certified, recycled paper and recyclable paper items are a great first choice here. Paper foodware and the napkins are better than plastic because they can be composted if they have food residue or, grease on them. When your paper plate or your paper napkin gets that grease on it, you can't recycle it anymore. So it's a great option for paper to be able to have that composting stream available as well, and to be able to put those items in the green bin when they're made of the appropriate materials. If you want to look at paper cups and other paper products, ensure that they're not lined with plastic and don't have any sort of, those plastic coatings that make them non-recyclable and also make them non-compostable. So we recommend really doing kind of your due diligence there and making sure if you're looking at a paper alternative that it truly is made of paper. And then a great resource if you're unsure about the recyclability or the compostability of your single-use plastic alternative is to check out the Region of Durham's Know Before You Throw guide, where you can, search for the products to find out if they're recyclable or compostable or if they should be landfill. or if you get your waste collected by a private waste collector, to check in with them and see what streams exist for the materials that you would like to use. So a top priority really is to reuse where you can, and then where it's not possible, start to think about those highly recyclable or compostable paper options. So where neither of those are possible, or really just looking at kind of what we want to avoid under all circumstances, we really want to move away from all single-use items that are going to be non-recyclable, difficult to recycle, and are disposable. So if it's only going to be able to be used once as a plastic material or kind of a plastic adjacent material, those should be avoided where possible. So items like a single-use plastic beverage bottle, the caps on those beverage bottles, the condiment sachets that I've talked about before, like your ketchup packets, the little creamer cups, things like that, plastic food pouches, plastic films, and shrink wraps, and all of these materials that have no end of life pathway. So they're going to end up in landfill or they're going to end up in our environment. So if you can find a replacement for these items that's reusable or recyclable, really try and make that switch. It's also really great to, buy in bulk where it makes sense. For example, instead of, using those single-use condiment sachets, really look at how you can install a bulk station for all of your condiments that customers can go to and really use the exact amount that they need for their meal, or, including that refillable ketchup bottle on the table for dine-in customers, so they don't have to look for those single-use options because they know that they have a different option available and they don't have to think twice about it. Resource-intensive materials should also not be used as a single-use product or packaging. So for example, glass or stainless steel, they both take a lot of resources, a lot of energy to create. So it's extremely wasteful to kind of take those materials and consider them as single use, because they're meant to be kind of materials that have their value maximized, which makes them a great option for reuse, but not a great option for single use. And then compostable plastics there at the bottom, kind of as I mentioned before, compostable plastics and bioplastics really aren't as compostable as we think they are or as they are claimed to be. And this is tricky because a lot of brands often try and sell us on the compostability of packaging. But things like, biodegradable coffee pod are actually not practically compostable in a backyard compost or municipalities compost. As I mentioned, we just don't have the infrastructure right now with the correct, conditions in order to break down these materials and properly have them composted. So they're going to end up as landfill as well. And overall, we really just want to kind of create the habit of, thinking about how we can avoid or minimize our waste wherever it's possible and feasible to do so. So where there's an alternative to some of these problematic materials, really kind of just doing your best within your business operations to be able to make that choice and make that shift away from those problematic items. So when I've talked a lot about reuse and reusable items and how they're beneficial, but how are they beneficial? They actually outperform all single-use options across all environmental metrics, which we know is going to be beneficial not only for the environment, but also to the bottom line. And I have just some kind of general benefits of reuse listed here. And then on the next page, I have kind of more specific benefits for the business community. But some of the benefits listed here on this page, by choosing to reuse, we're using fewer single-use items, which means less pollution, less litter in our communities and in our environment. Businesses can save money by purchasing these longer lasting, durable materials instead of having to buy new disposable items every week or every month or whatever your buying schedule is. Consumers don't have to pay for the packaging for reusables. So when we're thinking about BYO, businesses can actually offer discounts to customers that are bringing their own reusable to get refilled. Cities and towns can spend less time and money on collecting waste. There's more transparency in terms of, the sustainability of the packaging. Right now it can be really confusing to understand, is this packaging recyclable? Is this packaging compostable? But with reusable, you can be certain about that end of life for your product, and that after you've used it, it's going to move on to another reuse cycle. And that is a good feeling for the consumer. And overall, we just feel more confident about the products that we're purchasing, that we're using, and knowing that we're actually contributing to better environmental outcomes. So for businesses, there are kind of three really great benefits that come to mind when we talk about reusables. The first is the economic benefits. As I mentioned, you'll spend less on or eliminate the need to continuously repurchase a lot of these single-use materials. And Rethink Disposable, which is an organization out of the US, has conducted hundreds of pilots with small and medium-sized enterprises in order to help them transition. Primarily, it's been food serviceware businesses and helping them transition to reusables. And actually across every single one of those pilots, the business saved money. And the average savings ranged from $3,000 to $22,000 net annually by swapping out some of the disposables for reusables. So in a lot of these cases, the businesses didn't transform their entire business to become reusable. They made some really smart decisions about where it was possible for them to make that switch. And they still saw such great savings potential. So these businesses included, coffee shops and restaurants, market cafes and food trucks, caterers. There was even school cafeterias involved. And like I said, most of these initial changes brought in reusable materials in very specific circumstances. So maybe the restaurant decided that for on-site diners, they were going to eliminate single-use plastic cups and utilize reusable drinkware instead. Maybe they provide, reusable ramekin for their sauces so that the customer can go up to that bulk refill station and be able to serve themselves without the associated single-use plastic. So it was a lot of kind of simple swaps that really made a lasting, large impact. And even some of these businesses took on a strategy of employing, an ask first policy for any single-use item. And that ended up generating savings. So whether it was asking, is this for here or to go? And then if the customer was staying and dining in, being able to use those reusables, or if it was asking, or if it was allowing the consumer to ask for those single-use materials, say a paper straw, or any other sort of disposable to-go items, and providing those by request only. So there are so many different kind of pathways that businesses can take that will ultimately end up in some sort of economic benefit when reuse is involved. The second benefit there is customer satisfaction. And we know that consumers really want to find a way to become a part of the solution to the plastic waste crisis. And it can be difficult to know, how and where to start this work. And how to ask, some of your favorite businesses to maybe take on some of these changes. So it's even better if a customer can, walk into a store, into a restaurant, and really be able to immediately participate in a reuse system because the business already has that established and has already done the work. And as consumers, continue to search for, greener buying options, but becoming, that sustainability-minded business that focuses on the reduction of single-use items, reduction of waste, you can really build sort of a loyal customer base that want to have that consistent access to better materials than the disposable plastic we're used to. And then the obvious benefit is that, our businesses will no longer be contributing to the plastic waste crisis by making that switch to more durable, reusable materials. So you'll require fewer waste pickups because you'll produce less waste. And the businesses participating in those Rethink Disposable pilots avoided hundreds of thousands of individual pieces of single-use plastic. And they avoided hundreds to thousands, depending on the size of their business, but hundreds to thousands of pounds of waste annually for these items. So that's a really great impact and a really great potential that your business could have to kind of reduce the plastic waste footprint that you're generating. And, the more times that a business has its reusables reused and cycled through, the greater the environmental outcomes, as those virgin materials no longer have to be used to generate, thousands of single-use items. And you're contributing to decreasing the amount of raw materials that have to be extracted from our environment, decreasing the energy that we need to use to constantly produce these materials, as well as just reducing the amount of greenhouse gases that are associated with, the production of single-use plastic. But kind of overall, when we're making the transition to reusables, we're really becoming a part of a system that improves and extends the values of our materials and investing in the long-term savings that are possible, while also addressing, those growing concerns of consumers about the plastic waste that businesses are producing. So when we talk about, single-use materials in your business operations, it can be, difficult to know how or where to start, which is why it's important to kind of have an understanding of the plastic waste that you produce and what areas of your business kind of need the most attention. And to do so, you can really easily conduct a plastic waste audit, whether that's having somebody come in and do it or just doing it with your staff, in order to determine your plastic waste footprint and really identify kind of the scope of your plastic use. And that initial audit that you conduct can then be used as your plastic waste baseline, which you can compare your progress against as you make some of these changes and as you move away from single-use plastics. And to be successful, as I've mentioned before, staff really needs to be engaged and trained up on any of the reduction initiatives that your business plans to adopt, because staff really kind of represent the commitment and the buy-in to reduce single use, because they're oftentimes on the front lines with customers. They're explaining and delivering a lot of these reduction initiatives, which means that they need to be equipped with, that language, as well as, the reasoning and the passion to do so successfully. And it's also, really important throughout this process to be able to take on, staff suggestions when determining, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities to reduce plastic waste within your business. And this, creates obviously a sense of responsibility within the staff and a sense of ownership over some of these initiatives, which will also promote buy-in as well. And then finally, after conducting, a plastic waste audit, engaging your staff, you'll need to develop a plan and really kind of establish those targets in order to address the plastic weak spots that you found. So you can use your audit data to understand, where that most urgent action needs to be taken, and then create a plan to reduce those plastics. So, for example, if you found, majority of your back of house waste receptacles were full of, plastic overwrap from deliveries, what are your options to eliminate or reduce that waste? And within that, it's really important to set those SMART goals, being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So maybe this means, setting some short-term, some medium-term, some long-term goals for your business to work towards. But really, you should be able to measure your progress in achieving those goals. So whether it's, the weight of the plastic that you're reducing or the number of plastic items, that you're reducing, or however else you see fit to really represent the progress in shrinking your business's plastic waste footprint. And all of those actions will really help you kind of find a place to start your plastic reduction journey and establish, what you want to take on within your business in order to become more circular. So, we don't want to prescribe specific steps because no business is the same, and everybody has their individual needs and capacities. So it's really important to kind of be self-reflective in a way and understand where are your weak spots, and what can you do with the tools that you have. So what should your business's next steps be? So first of all, don't be hesitant or afraid to take that first step to reduce and eliminate your plastic waste footprint. A step forward, regardless of how big or small, is a step forward. And I know that plastic is so ubiquitous that it's a daunting subject, and touches so many areas of our lives and our businesses. But all change starts with that first singular action. So really figuring out what that looks like for your business and taking that first step is crucial. Your business can go beyond the federally banned single-use plastics as well. As we discussed, that ban includes the plastic bags, the cutlery, food serviceware, ring carriers, the plastic stir sticks and straws. So how can your business eliminate other problematic materials that aren't listed there? Maybe say like hot and cold disposable beverage cups, or the condiment sachets that I've referenced a lot here are really kind of great step beyond those 6 items. Building a network of businesses committed to single-use reduction in your community can be really invaluable. One of the most important things you can do to establish a reusable system is to be able to collaborate with other businesses and share, the knowledge and experience that you've gained by trying different sort of initiatives and seeing what other people have done that has worked, and really kind of sharing that wealth of knowledge as everybody grows together and tries to figure out what the best systems are to avoid single-use plastic. And lastly, your business can recognize the economic savings associated with making the switch to reusables, and really becoming that environmental leader. And I know that sometimes being the first one out of the gate on some of these initiatives can seem risky, but in fact, you're really maximizing your opportunity for savings. And those that do that work now to transform their operations, or even take those small bite-sized pieces and make those changes, are really having the benefit of the time to figure out those right solutions, instead of having to be legislated down the road to do so. And those businesses are always going to look more appealing in the eyes of the sustainability-minded consumers who want to see the businesses take on more responsibility for their single-use plastic. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we do have our part toolkits available online for more industry-specific information about how your business can move away from single-use plastic. And additionally, if you have any specific questions, you can contact us at advocacy@mindyourplastic.ca, as we're always, willing to help however we can with the plastic reduction journey. So thank you for listening. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.